You cut out a little bit,
It's
yeah.
like wearing a continuous glucose monitor is like having an instrument panel or a dashboard for the most important metabolic fuel that your body's using, which is
Wow.
glucose. And there are people working on a continuous ketone monitor. There's continuous lactate monitors that are being used. In the future, you can think about there's going to be essentially like real-time metabolomics where you're going to have a bunch of different metabolites that are measured, in the interstitial fluid or maybe through your skin. I know Apple's working on that. That you can look at your smartphone and basically see, okay, to be optimized going into my workout or into my meeting, I should consume, a shake that has this or whatever. It's like where that last meal really disrupted, this metabolic profile. So I'm going to not eat that again or eat less of it or try another meal. And I think
Wow.
really that's kind of the future. And that's the Department of Defense is really pushing this because they put certain guys in extreme environments where the limitation is not the machine. Like if you put a guy in a fighter jet, like it pulls massive G's and it basically can take you beyond the ability of human physiology as far as G force and things like that. So the warfighter pilot has all this feedback from the machine, but we don't have feedback on the guy piloting the machine, who is the limitation of the machine. So if you could put a patch on you that gives that information to yourself, but also to the team, at mission control or whatever, then they can, you can be better informed to utilize that machine and conduct your mission in a successful way. There's a whole program called Instrumenting the Warfighter, and a lot of
Mm.
technologies are evolving out of that.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. How would that compare to something like modafinil, like Provigil, or like like ADHD medication? Because I've heard that a lot of the time in military they'll give soldiers Adderall and Vyvanse and modafinil, Provigil, armodafinil, adrafinil, Phenibut, all these different type of nootropics. How would the ketogenic stack up to an ADHD medication or a narcolepsy medication like Provigil?
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up because I don't think it's talked about much, but I've talked about this to the teams guys a lot, the special operators. They have like very extreme sleep disruption, right? So they sometimes they do their missions at night. So and they also use what's the drug Ambien to fall asleep. So sometimes they'll take like two Ambien and then like two modafinil to wake up and pop out of it, which is not the best. So I think more education is needed to get your sleep health and
Hmm.
sleep hygiene going. But modafinil is used quite a bit. I mean, it's used sparingly from the perspective of it being prescribed and given to the warfighter. But 200 to 400 milligrams is typically the dose for that. If there
Wow,
is,
that's a
if they're
lot.
going into, yeah, that would give me a crushing headache. I think one time, I don't know, you remember because you're in Tampa when Hurricane
Yeah.
Irma came in. Do you remember that? That was the
Uh,
first time I ever took
what
modafinil. I stayed up all night.
what year
Was
was
it
that?
Irma?
2017?
It was September 2017, and I remember our house in Tampa had a basement, and I stayed up all night, and all we heard is stuff crashing around. And I was thinking we didn't know what was happening to the house, but it wasn't like it was kind of it went from a category 4 to 2 or whatever,
Right. It didn't
but
do
stuff was
anything, but everyone,
crashing all around
yeah.
us. Yeah, we had a rare house in Tampa that actually had a basement, but I knew I had to stay up all night just to stay vigilant, and I had some modafinil. I was like, oh, this would be a good time for modafinil. So I took modafinil, and then the next day I was up, just cutting with the chainsaw all day, just getting our neighbors out, and just
Why
cutting,
is
getting
Dom
stuff,
so
trees off our.
active? He's so motivated.
Yeah, and I didn't know why. I thought it was like the change in the barometric pressure, but I had a crushing headache all day, and I took 200
Mm,
milligrams, I think, and then I
mm,
later found out that modafinil is a great tool, but I have like 200 milligram tablets. I would break it in half and then break it in a quarter, and that 50 milligrams with a cup of coffee is more than I would never take more than 50 milligrams. And when we traveled to like Australia and Thailand and other, when I'm totally flipped as far as or
mhm.
the worst is going to Europe actually.
Wow.
So I will when I travel internationally, that's when I bring my modafinil, and that kind of wakes me up and then resets
Yeah, because
my body.
we're not sure how it works, right? Like the mechanism of action. It's I think they said they're not 100% sure, but it works on the circadian rhythm and kind of biohacking the circadian rhythm versus like like something like Adderall where it is an amphetamine where it's pushing dopamine and pushing the receptors out. Modafinil works more on the circadian rhythm, and they're not really sure why it works, but they have speculation to think that it works off of that process. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
People,
it has a good
yeah,
safety record relative to dexedrine or the amphetamines, and it's less dopaminergic. Like I don't look forward to taking it.
yeah,
I
no
probably what I
euphoric.
had was expired a long time ago. But yeah, I don't get a euphoria from it. So it's not very dopaminergic. I think the mechanism, from what I know, is anti GABAergic. So GABA will make you sleep, maybe through the adenosine receptors too. There's a little bit going on, but I know whenever I take it, I will take it like in the morning. I sleep like a baby later in the night, and I know other versions of these things have longer half lives, and they can cause
Mm,
sleep disruption. So, but modafinil, I think, taken first thing in the morning, when you're at a new location and you have to get your circadian, reset. But sun, I mean,
yeah,
there's no sun, exercise, things like that. I'm always going for that first. But modafinil can give you a push, especially if you're doing something that's you're really cognitively task loaded. It becomes important.
yeah, yeah. It's just like a wakefulness drug, right? So,
Mhm.
um, so I think I think I watched the Super Physiological Man, and it was for the high level entrepreneurs. It's 50 milligrams of modafinil and then 5 milligrams of amphetamines, whether that would be Adderall or what was the other one? Vyvanse. That the other one is meth doxtrin or whatever, and then that is oh man, what is that? Ritalin, and then the other one,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
So,
know
but
all these drugs. I used to teach kids in special education or kids that had behavioral problems, and like half of
mhm,
the class were on these drugs before I really knew what they were. It was back when I was in college. I've never taken any kind of amphetamine. I've taken modafinil, ephedrine,
mhm,
but other than that, I haven't really taken any of the. So I don't have a way to gauge and compare it to
to
that.
ketosis. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Again, guys,
curious.
this is not medical
Yeah, yeah.
advice. We're just
No.
talking like two friends.
Yeah, but I really do think that because I have loved ones and family and stuff that have used the drugs in the past. I don't know
Mhm,
for ADHD and things like that, and close friends that have
mhm,
kids that use these drugs. So I do think that they're a potential problem for the developing brain.
mhm.
Using these
Yeah, and
drugs
the
and
adolescent.
being yeah, when you sit
Yeah.
down, I had students that I used to study with, and they would not put in the time and work. Like they would get their cup of coffee, open their pills, take it. Okay, now I'm ready to study. It's like they wouldn't even like try to
Yeah. It's
study
like a
for a test
pre-workout.
without. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like a
and
pre-workout
I'm
for
pretty
a
coffee's
cognitive
pretty
task.
strong for
Yeah.
yeah,
Really?
coffee's a great drug. Yeah, well, coffee, I'm a fast metabolizer of coffee, so luckily I could, but I still don't consume it past 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But
Wow.
it works really
Wow.
well for me, especially if I give like sometimes I'll take a day off or just do 1 cup instead of my normal 3 or 4 cups, and then the next day, coffee is like has a bigger hit. So just abstaining from it or backing off a little bit on a day that I don't need it, like over the weekends I was doing farm work outside, and I don't go through like a caffeine withdrawal if I'm just outside, in the sun doing. But if I'm have a big day at the desk where I have to have a lot of work done, then
Mhm.
if I eliminate coffee or just have some tea, and then on my desk day, it kind of resets my caffeine responsiveness. So
Wow.
just doing small variations like that can make a really big difference.
Make a big
It's
difference.
amazing. Yep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the problem with amphetamines is it sometimes it can stimulate you too much, and you get into like a state of euphoria, and you're so happy that when it comes to like work, which most people, like most college kids that take these things, take these type of ADHD medications, they take it to get knock out papers and get more work done. But sometimes if you take too much, right, that's why again, not medical advice, but people that do take it, they do very low dose, like 5 milligrams. You you get too stimulated. Something like modafinil, which is not very stimulated, just a wakefulness agent, that would probably be more beneficial because you're not in a state of euphoria. You're just awake and you're ready to go versus being so happy and like want to give random strangers hugs because that can happen when you're too stimulated.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a fine line of balancing it
Yeah.
out. But I think it's interesting that because, yeah, like the Department of Defense, they have a huge budget. They have some of the smartest people. They have an incredible organization over there. They could prescribe pharmacological drugs all day long, like modafinil and ADHD medication. But it's interesting that they're so persistent and motivated to talk about ketosis and maybe get it, and we can get into BHB salts or ketone esters because they're like, wow, this is so useful. Maybe to stack it on top of pharmacology, but there has to be something there that these pharmaceutical drugs can't do, like a state of ketosis can. So I think it's very
Mhm.
interesting that when they have all the access to all these high profile scientists and medications from a pharmacological level, they still are reaching out to Dom and going through the ketogenic diet and getting these, you know, keto esters or BHB salts. So yeah. Uh,
Well, I'd like to
So
clarify that what I study is very, very specific, like central nervous system oxygen toxicity. So that's a
mm,
seizure. It's a grand mal seizure, and we know that ketosis is very potent at preventing that.
right.
But research is being done now in hypoxic environments. So looking at ketosis under conditions of hypoxia, because if you put an athlete under hypoxia and put them on a treadmill and then give them a glucose solution or carbohydrates under ambient conditions or 1 atmosphere normal oxygen, you'll actually increase their performance. But under hypoxic conditions, you don't get that performance increase. And there's different reasons for that. Hypoxia may decrease the activity of pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and the glucose transporters and things. It's not fully clear why that's the case, but glucose sugar performance fuels do not work under hypoxia. So ketosis, then it's kind of like an interesting theory that's being practiced right now under conditions of hypoxia, so that you may have an advantage in that environment, environments where you're going to have seizures. But also a big push now is like there are a lot of guys in the military are overweight. So low carb
Oh wow.
diets didn't necessarily have to be at the level of ketogenic, but probably the big push now in the Department of Defense is we got to get our guys metabolically healthy and fit for there's resiliency and also readiness, right? So readiness
Mm,
is a big, so there's like programs on readiness, and it's thought a lot of these guys just are not at the readiness level that they need to be, and dropping
mm,
weight, and they get like shin splints when they run a lot. You get guys that are overweight, and then they go to boot camp, and they're all
mm.
messed up with their knees and their shin splints and things like that. If they just drop some weight, they'd be doing much better. And that's a strategy. Just going low carb, even with the MREs. To just having
Yeah,
a low
absolutely.
carb
Dry foods.
MRE.
Yeah. When you're so I don't know your experience. Obviously, you're an expert, and I'm just a human guinea pig. But in my experience with ketosis, I'm very clear and calm. In your experience, does it kind of get you into a meditative state, but also lacking energy? Or do you get energy with a calm Zen feeling, right? Because I could see someone that is in a ketogenic state. So for me, I drink a lot of coffee. I take stimulants like coffee, and then I take different nootropics like alpha GPC, and then we can get into that if you want. But I have a lot of energy throughout the day. I'm also a very energetic person. It's very hard for me to calm down. My brain is always racing. I'm 30 now, and I'm finally at 10:30 starting to get tired. Which in my 20s, if it wasn't 3 in the morning and I could wake up at 7, I wasn't getting tired. I just have so much energy. My dad is almost 60, and he's not on TRT or anything, no HRT replacement, and he has more energy than me. So
Mhm.
maybe it's a genetic thing. But do you notice that when you are in a state of ketosis, you seem very clear. You're like, you see the world. You're like, wow, all these like minions and rats are running around wasting time. And I have a direct approach on the objective because I have brain fog and I don't have anxiety. I'm very, very zen and clear. But what about the energy levels, the physical energy to go out and do things and get stuff done? Do you stack, in your experience, other compounds with maybe a ketone ester or a BHB salt, or being in a state of ketosis, or just being in a state of ketosis is good enough for you? You have plenty of energy working on the farm, working in the lab, cognitively and physical.
Hmm. Yeah, there's different states can be optimized for different activities, right? So if I'm in a super calm kind of zen-like state, which is good for writing and the flow of thoughts and putting new ideas down, that might not be ideal if I'm going to my barn gym and doing deadlifts, right? So I have to be kind of amped up for
I don't know.
that.
You look pretty
Uh,
good. You look pretty good. If anyone Googles Dom, you had a body on you, man.
yeah, I mean, I've been training a long time, and it's like a lot of people ask, it's like, you know, I didn't do the ketogenic diet and then work up to like a 700-pound deadlift. Like I started training when I was like 13 years old, so it's like
Mm.
I've been doing it for a long time, and I was eating massive amounts and maintaining a weight of 250 or 60 all through like college for the most part. But now I'm just to maintain like 210, 215, something like that. So,
Wow.
but the
How
keto,
tall
I
are
feel
you?
better at this weight. It's just a little over 6 foot, like 6'1", and I think
Okay.
I was like 216, 218, and that's like my default weight. That's kind of what I go back to, just eating like low carb, keto, intermittent fasting once or twice a week. I'm not forcing myself to eat. I'm eating according to kind of my body needs. I do notice that if I do a lot more work outside and start lifting more, my energy needs are higher, and I'm start eating a lot more protein to sustain the muscle growth and repair and things like that. But if so, what I like to do a 3 day fast like every quarter. And what I do, I'll allocate a lot of writing time and a lot of reading time during that time. And I will use stimulants, but I'll probably use a little bit less. I'll use just maybe 2 cups of coffee instead of four.
Mm.
Because fasting, I become very sensitive. Like your body becomes very sensitive to whatever you're giving it. And I noticed that. And if I have too much coffee, it has the opposite effect. Like I get a little bit too strung out, start getting a headache towards the end of the day. I wake up with sort of, I have to have coffee to overcome my withdrawal. Kind of, I'll wake up kind of with a headache if I had too much coffee the next day, especially if I don't stay hydrated. So these are all sort of negative effects. But I think from a readiness perspective, attacking the day physically and mentally, ideally you want to keep like a eucaloric diet, and you want to make sure you're giving your body the energy that it needs. And for me, I do low carb and keto. If I am fasting, sometimes I introduce ketone salts. The electrolytes really help out. You want to balance. I use a product called Keto Start, and that is sort of giving your body, restoring sodium and potassium, magnesium, things like that. And it boosts your ketones, so it's boosting your brain energy throughout the day. I think exogenous ketones are a really good nootropic, and I think they need to be studied in that way. We do see positive effects in our animal model studies. And we're doing some human research now on different compounds. Um, but I think one can use the ketogenic diet in the state of ketosis for mental endurance and stamina. And then if they're training, they don't necessarily have to dump in carbohydrates, but to protein, increasing your protein to 1.5 to even 2 grams per kilogram, which is like, if I'm like 100 kilograms, so about 200 um, grams a day of
Mm.
protein. I would do if I'm physically active. If I'm just really sitting at my desk all day, 1.5 grams, so about
That doesn't kick
150
you out.
grams a day.
That doesn't kick you out of
It
ketosis.
doesn't. No, I
Wow.
have like fatty cuts of meat, fatty fish. Lately, I've been eating a lot of turkey because we bought a 30-pound turkey. And I realized I feel a little bit different when I eat turkey. Like I'm a little more calm. And I do think
Mm.
that if you're fasting and on a ketogenic diet, I feel like my serotonin levels may be a little bit lower.